All right. The name of the story is The Goose Girl at the Spring. Once upon a time, there was an old woman who lived in the woods up on a mountain. And she lived in a small house, really in the middle of nowhere. And this old woman had a flock of geese that she tended to almost as if they were her children. And every day, and she had a cane too. She was very old. She hobbled along. It was very hard for her to walk. But she was always cheerful. And every day she would take a big cloth, throw it over her shoulder, and take a couple baskets and go to some place in the forest where she could find wild apples and pears and cut some grass for her geese. She worked very hard. She did this every day and worked in different parts of the forest. And if somebody came across her, she would say, "Good day to you. I know I look like an old woman and I'm working hard, but everybody has to work hard, and that's how life is." People tended to avoid her. They thought maybe she was a witch. I know one time a father was walking with his son on a beautiful day in the woods, and they came across her on the path, and the father said good day to her, and he pulled his son, and they walked away quickly, and he said to his son as they were leaving, "If you ever see her, you run away. I think she's a witch." Well, anyhow, she cared about her work every day. Now, one day, there was walking in the woods a young man, and it was a beautiful day like today. It was sunny, the apple trees were blooming, there was a breeze in the air, the grass was green, and he had decided to take a walk for the woods. So he was walking in the woods and climbing this mountain a little bit and really enjoying himself. And at one point he came across the old woman. And she was there. There was a cloth spread out before her, and she was cutting grass and putting it in the cloth to give to her geese. And she already had baskets filled with wild pears and wild apples. When he saw her all bent over and how hard it was for her to move, he felt a little pity for her, and he said, "Old woman, why are you doing such work?" And she said, "Who's going to do this work for me? I do this work. It's good for me. I'm feeding my geese." "Ha! Look at you. Nice young man. I bet you've got strong legs. Who are you?" And he said, "I'm the son of a count." And she said, "Figures. Nice rich man. You've probably never done any hard work in your life. You wouldn't be able to carry my baskets and carry my grass for me, would you, huh?" Well, he thought about it and he said, "Well, I am the son of a rich man, but that doesn't mean I can't work. I'm not afraid to work." So he said to her, "Sure, I'll be glad to carry your baskets." And she says, "Great. We don't have far to go. It's a little trip. Let me finish gathering all the grass." And she gathered all the grass in the cloth, and then she pulled up the corners of the cloth and swung them over the young man's back. Now, when he took it on his back, it felt like that cloth was full of rocks. He couldn't believe it. And then she handed him the 2 baskets of the apples and pears. And now he was all bent over. He said, "Oh, this is heavy." And she said, "Oh, come on. I do this every day. You're a young man with strong legs." So he resolved not to complain. And he started walking with her. Well, as he started walking, his burden felt heavier and heavier. And she was walking quite sprightly with her cane all of a sudden, but he was bent over with a bag of grass on his back, and he was carrying the 2 baskets, and he was saying, "This is hard." And she said, "This is nothing. I do this every day." So they went along, and soon they had to start climbing up the mountain. And for him, that was really hard work, and sweat started pouring from his face. And he started huffing and puffing, and the rocks underneath his feet were slipping on, and he said, "I can't go on." And she said, "What? Me, an old woman, I do this every day? You, a rich young man, you can't do that. Come on." Well, he heard that, and he heard the challenge, and he went, "All right, I can do it." And he kept walking up, but each step was so hard. And at some point he said, "I have to take a rest." And she said, "Nope." She took the cane and hit him on the back of the legs. "Get going, young man. It's only an hour away." He went, "An hour?" And she said, "You promised me you'd carry that load." And she started jumping around and hitting him on the backs of his legs, and he just started plodding forward. He moved and walked, and he said to himself, "I just have to get to her house, and then I'll be done. This is ridiculous." Well, as he walked and climbed, he got sweatier, he got red in the face, and she seemed to get lighter and lighter. She was dancing around with her cane, and at one point, she hopped on his back. She just jumped up and hopped on his back, and he said, "What?" And she said, "Oh, come on, I weigh next to nothing." But he said to himself, "Are you kidding? You look light, but you weigh like a bag of stones." Anyhow, they walked and walked, and finally they came to this clearing in the woods, and there was a small house, and the woman jumped off his back, and there was another lady there, much younger than the old woman, but still not young, who had wrinkles on her face and grayish hair and a big nose with a big black bump on it. And the woman jumped off of the young man and went to the other woman and said, "Daughter, daughter, how are you doing?" And daughter said, "Mother, you took so long to get here, I was afraid something happened to you." And the old woman said, "Oh, no, this young man came and helped me. Why, we were just chatting and laughing all the way here. He carried that burden like it was next to nothing." And the young man put down, of course, the baskets and the big bag on his back and started wiping his brow. And she said, "Now, you're not going anywhere. You're tired. You sit on this bench over here and rest. And when you're done resting, I have a reward for you. You'll get something for what you've done for me. But rest right now. You're in no condition to go back down the mountain." And then she turned to her daughter and said, "Daughter, you go inside. You shouldn't be outside with this young man. He might fall in love with you, and that wouldn't be right without any chaperone." And the other woman scurried back into the house, and the young man laughed to himself. He said, "Even if she was 30 years younger, I wouldn't be interested in her. She's as ugly as can be, and she's older and thicker than me." Anyhow, he sat on the bench and he looked around, and the spot he was in was beautiful. There was a lovely stream going behind there that the geese were paddling in. And there was blooming apple trees, and there was a wild meadow with all kinds of things blooming, and the smells in the air were wonderful, and there was a warm breeze. He felt sleepy. He laid on the bench and he went to sleep. A little while later, the old woman came over and woke him up and said, "All right, you're done with your nap. Time for you to leave." He rubbed his eyes and went, "Oh, oh," and the geese were cackling all around them. And she said, "But for what you've done for me, I'm going to give you something. Here, take this." And she handed to him a green box, and he looked at it and he said, "This looks like this is carved out of an emerald." And she looked at him and said, "Yes, this is carved out of an emerald. Take this box. It will bring you good fortune. And thank you for helping me today." And she seemed like almost a different person than the person he'd met earlier, but he said, "All right, thank you." And off he started walking. And as he walked, he could hear the cackle of the geese in the background. And he walked and he walked and he walked. He thought he walked off the mountain, but it turns out he got lost. He got really lost. He got lost for 3 days. No matter where he went, the paths were different. He found nuts to eat and wild fruit. He wasn't too worried. He knew eventually he'd hit civilization, but finally he did hit a small village, and it was really a different country, and they pointed him in the direction of the palace. And he went up to the palace, and he was given an interview with the king and the queen, and he told them that he was a count and that he was lost. And they asked him, did he bring anything with him? And he showed them the green box, and the queen asked for it, and she handed her the green box. The queen opened the green box, and when she saw it, she fell over in a faint. The king stood up and said, "Arrest that young man!" And the soldiers were about to pounce on him, but the queen recovered and she went, No, leave him be. Everybody leave this room right now. I want to speak to him alone." And the king and everybody else left the room, closed the doors, and there she was alone with the young man. And she was holding the box in her hand, looking at it, and she started crying. And she said to him, "You have no idea what I've been through. 3 years ago, I have 3 beautiful daughters, and 3 years ago the youngest turned 15. And I'll tell you about my youngest daughter. She was very different from the day she was born. She had beautiful, lovely hair. Her eyes shone like the stars. Her cheeks were the color of apple blossoms. And whenever she wept, pearls and emeralds would come from her eyes." Everybody thought she was beautiful, and she was very sweet too. Not just beauty, but she was beautiful inside. She was very kind and sweet. Well, she was my third daughter, and the day she turned 15, my husband, the king, decided to call the three girls into him, our three daughters, and he was going to divide the kingdom up between them. So he said to them, I don't know how long I'll live. I'm going to divide my kingdom between you, so I'm not worried about it. So you have whatever I have when I'm dead, and there's no argument. But first, I have to make some judgment about how to divide up my kingdom, and I've decided that I'm going to ask you how much you love me. And that will help me make my decision. So, how much do you love me? Well, the first daughter thought, and she said, I love you like the sweetest sugar that I put in my tea. All right, said the king, and the second daughter said, I love you as much as my most beautiful dress. All right, said the king. And how about you, he said to the youngest daughter, and she thought, and she didn't say anything. And he said, come on, say something. And she said, how can I explain my love for you? It's all the time. It's whether I'm sleeping or I'm awake. How can I explain it? He said, come on, your sisters gave an answer, you give an answer. Finally, she said, all right. You know, anything you eat doesn't taste like anything without salt, but the minute you put salt in it, it tastes so much better. I love you like salt. Now, when she said that, the king got furious. He had a hair-trigger temper. He got furious. He got angry. He called all the guards. All right, my kingdom is divided between my two oldest daughters. This one, the youngest, does not deserve to live here. Put a bag of salt on her back, tie it to her back, and leave her in the woods. Now, the queen heard this, and she was begging him, but when the king had a temper, there was nothing that could be done. And in those days, they didn't know anything about anger management, so he had to be obeyed. And so they did that. They took a bag of salt, and they tied it to my daughter's back, and they took her in the woods and left her. 3 days later, the king realized that he had been ridiculously angry, and he felt really bad, and he sent all the soldiers out and everybody to go find her, but they couldn't find her. And now, some days I hope maybe somebody found her and took her in. Other times I despair that maybe wild animals ate her. I still have the hope that she found her way in the woods and somebody took her in. But now today you bring me this box. And when I opened it, inside was a pearl, just like the pearls she used to weep when she was crying. In fact, the day the king had her sent to the forest, she wept incredible tears, and the whole pathway was littered with pearls and precious gems. So now I see this pearl and I think, I have hope. Maybe my daughter's alive? Could it be? How did you come across this pearl? And so the young man told her about finding this old woman and helping her. And he said to her, I didn't see anybody who looked like your daughter, but this old woman, I'm guessing, is probably some kind of witch, and she gave me this box, so maybe, and the queen said, yes, maybe she knows something about my daughter because she had one of her pearls in there. We must go find this old woman immediately. Can you find her? Well, the young man said, I think I kind of know how to get there. I did get a little lost coming here, but I think I can find my way. Well, the queen ordered for the king to be found. She told him what happened. He said immediately, we must go with this young man. And off they went. Off they went. And here's where I'm going to take a pause because there's a break in the story.